The silent billionaire. When a flight attendant slaps the wrong passenger. It began like any other flight. An exclusive private jet gliding effortlessly through the sky at 40,000 feet. The passengers, each carefully chosen for the luxury and comfort this private jet offered, were immersed in their own worlds. The soft hum of the engines filled the cabin. The delicate clink of crystal glasses echoed quietly as flight attendants served drinks, and a sense of opulence settled over everything. It was a world where only the wealthy and influential could experience the kind of peace and grandeur that came with such travel. No commercial airlines here. This was a private jet, a symbol of status, power, and an elite lifestyle. Among the passengers, however, was one woman who didn't quite seem to belong. She was seated alone, far from the others, her demeanor calm and composed. Unlike the well-dressed individuals around her, she wore simple, understated clothes, nothing flashy or extravagant. She wasn't trying to draw attention to herself. In fact, she seemed deliberately subdued. She didn't speak much, barely glanced around, and appeared lost in thought, her eyes gazing out the window at the clouds below. But what the flight crew and the passengers didn't know was this. The woman sitting quietly, almost invisibly in the corner, wasn't just another wealthy passenger. She wasn't merely someone lucky enough to afford a seat on such a luxurious jet. No, this woman was the owner of the very plane they were traveling on. She wasn't just some anonymous figure. She was the CEO, the visionary behind a multi-billion-dollar empire. She had made this flight possible, not because of her wealth, but because of her silent influence and quiet power. Her name was known only to a select few, and her presence, though understated, was a quiet testament to her extraordinary accomplishments. But on this flight, none of that mattered. To the flight attendant, she was just another face in the crowd. The flight attendant, an impeccable professional, moved through the cabin with the precision of someone who had done this job 1,000 times before. She was polished, poised, and completely in control. Her movements were quick and efficient as she checked on passengers, delivered drinks, and made sure the experience was as perfect as it could be. There was a certain air of superiority in her demeanor, one that came from years of working in an environment where she was accustomed to catering to the needs of the rich and powerful. But there was something else lurking beneath that professional exterior, an unconscious bias, a subtle prejudice that she had never acknowledged. As the flight attendant made her way down the aisle, she caught a glimpse of the woman in the corner. Her eyes briefly flickered over her, and in that split second, an assumption was made. The woman's simple attire, her quiet presence, and her lack of noticeable luxury led the flight attendant to believe she was just another regular passenger. Someone who, perhaps, didn't quite belong in such an exclusive environment. The flight attendant's mind made a snap judgment. This woman was not someone to be taken seriously. With this assumption firmly in place, the flight attendant's demeanor shifted. Her politeness remained, but there was a subtle edge to it, a shift in the way she addressed the woman. It was a coldness, a distance, perhaps a tone of impatience. But it wasn't something she consciously noticed. It was just a reflex, a product of her ingrained biases. She didn't see the woman as a person. She saw her as someone who didn't belong in the luxurious world of private jets, a world that the flight attendant had come to know all too well. The tension in the cabin grew slowly, unnoticed by most. The woman, still sitting silently, had done nothing to draw attention to herself. She wasn't angry. She wasn't upset. She didn't respond to the flight attendant's cold tone or the subtle dismissal in her voice. She simply stayed calm, unbothered, her eyes focused on the horizon outside. She knew better than to react to such things. But then, something happened. Something that no one could have predicted. The flight attendant approached with a tray of drinks, her smile as practiced and professional as always. She leaned down toward the woman, her words more clipped than before. There was an edge to her voice now, a hint of superiority, as though she were doing the woman a favor. Without warning, the flight attendant raised her hand and, in a moment of shocking aggression, slapped the woman across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the cabin, shattering the quiet tension that had built up over the course of the flight. It was a slap of pure arrogance, a slap born from a deep-seated prejudice that had never been challenged. The passengers, stunned by what they had just witnessed, fell silent. Gasps filled the air as everyone turned to look at the woman who had been struck. But what no one knew, what no one in that cabin could possibly have guessed, was that the woman they had just slapped wasn't just any passenger. She wasn't a helpless, inconsequential person. She was the one who owned the jet. She was the CEO. She was the billionaire who had made this entire experience possible for everyone aboard. For a moment, the cabin held its breath. The flight attendant stood there, her hands still poised in the air, as if she hadn't fully processed what she had just done. Her eyes widened in realization. The room seemed to freeze. The woman who had been struck remained perfectly still, her expression unreadable. The flight attendant's mind raced. She had just made a grave mistake, one that would cost her dearly. She had no idea who this woman was, but now she was about to find out. The woman slowly stood up, her movements deliberate, measured. There was no anger in her gaze, no outrage, just a calm, controlled energy that radiated power. She didn't shout. She didn't demand an apology. Instead, she simply looked at the flight attendant, her eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. "I think you should know who I am," the woman said, her voice low, but unmistakably authoritative. "I am the owner of this jet. This flight exists because of me, and you just slapped the wrong person." The flight attendant's face drained of color as the full weight of the situation hit her. She stammered out an apology, her voice filled with genuine horror. But the woman didn't acknowledge it. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough to silence the entire cabin. The passengers, once oblivious to the woman's identity, now sat in stunned silence, their gazes shifting uncomfortably between the CEO and the flight attendant. The flight attendant, mortified, dropped to her knees, pleading for forgiveness. But the woman, with her quiet strength, showed no desire for revenge. She didn't need to humiliate the flight attendant in front of everyone. Instead, she simply spoke the truth. That power, true power, is not always loud or visible. It doesn't need to be flaunted. It can exist quietly in the background, unseen by those who are too quick to judge. As the flight continued, the dynamic in the cabin shifted. The flight attendant was no longer the one in control, no longer the one who assumed authority. She was the one who had been humbled. And the woman, the CEO, had proven that power could be wielded with grace, with dignity, and with the quiet strength that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. In the end, It wasn't about the slap. It wasn't about the flight attendant's mistake. It was about the dangerous consequences of assumptions. The price of underestimating someone based on their appearance or demeanor. It was a story of humility, of grace under pressure, and of the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard. It was a reminder that no one, no matter how they appear, should ever be judged by their outward appearance. And sometimes, the most powerful people in the room are the ones who sit quietly, unnoticed, until the moment comes when they must rise and make their presence known.